The opinions expressed on Two-Way Traffic are those of Darren Coleman and are for general information purposes only. It does not constitute any legally binding engagement between the podcasters and anyone else. Always check with your advisors to obtain your own tax or investment advice. Welcome to Two-Way Traffic with Darren Coleman. In this series, Darren aims to guide you through the complexities, complications, implications, and most importantly, the advantages of having money and family on both sides of the border.
In this episode, personal injury lawyer and mediator Andrew Iacobelli joins Darren to talk about what can happen to Canadians who get into accidents in the United States and the importance of keeping your insurance up to date.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Two-Way Traffic, the podcast. And I'm joined today by my friend, Andrew Iacobelli, who's the founder and principal at Iacobelli Law. And this is an interesting conversation for anybody that travels to the United States, even for a short period of time. Andrew, you're a pioneer in cross-border disability law and personal injury law. And you and I have had a couple of conversations in the past, and I am fascinated by the things that I didn't know I didn't even know. So we're going to explore some of these today and how people can just be on guard for little things that could actually cause them big problems. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Darren. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and share some information for your audience about cross-border accidents and what their rights are. It's a passion of mine.
Perfect. Well, and along with both being cross-border specialists in our own way, you and I actually share another thing in common, which at the end I'll mention because it's kind of funny. It's something you enjoy and I pay for. So we'll move on. So just so everybody knows, you guys, you run a big firm. There's 5 lawyers on the team?
Yes.
And like 70 paralegals, I think. From your website.
We have lots of paralegals and clerks and other staff to support the lawyers, but 5 lawyers practicing in the area of disability, car accidents, personal injury matters, offices in Ontario, offices in Florida, Texas, and British Columbia more recently.
Perfect. Yeah. And so in Ontario, you're in Richmond Hill, and your Vancouver office, I Google mapped it. It's a block from my Vancouver office that I have there. So next time we're both out there, we'll go for coffee. So I want to dive into a couple of things that I think would really surprise people. And I just want to go over a couple of scenarios, and you kind of tell me as the lawyer what the risks are or what people do. Sure. So, so I'm on vacation. I'm in Florida. I get hit by a car. I trip and fall. I'm somehow injured. And I see the signs everywhere that say, hurt in a car, call Bill Matar or whatever it is. And I go to the lawyer. And in Florida or Texas, whatever, are they the right person for me to talk to as a visiting Canadian? Because they're there. So should I go to that local lawyer and say, what are my rights? And, I've been injured. What are my entitlements? Are they going to be able to guide me?
Sure. So, it's a good question. So I don't want to say that a local lawyer, obviously a local lawyer knows about the local law. So let's use Florida as an example, because that's a common cross-border jurisdiction for our practice.
Yeah.
And I'll use the example of a Canadian resident, Ontario resident that is in Florida, and they're involved in a motor vehicle crash. Just to give some context to that question.
I've driven the I-75. This is obviously something that will happen. Yeah.
All right. So a couple of scenarios. One, if it's a car accident claim, the Canadian auto insurance, so let's use Ontario for instance, Ontario auto insurance provides coverage. Okay, so first party benefits for injuries, not just your property damage, but also for your physical bodily injuries, anywhere in Canada and in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there are a couple important coverages there. One is the no fault coverage. So that means irrespective of fault, if a Canadian Ontario resident is injured because of a car in Florida, for instance, they still have recourse against their own auto insurance policy for what's called no fault or accident benefits. And the coverage will depend on the nature, the severity of the injuries, and also choices that the individual has to make. So if it's a cross-border case, the Ontario auto policies, which are standardized in this respect, give the policyholder, so the injured party, the choice. So that person can then choose between, let's say, Florida or Ontario benefits. They can elect either Ontario or Florida, and the election is final. So it's a really, really important decision. Okay. So just
interrupt for how fast do they need to make this? I imagine it's pretty soon after the incident. They've got to elect this choice, right? Because if they need care or they need capital to income, they're making this choice very quickly and probably not in the best frame of mind either, right?
Right. Yeah. The choice comes quickly because the insurance company wants to know how to adjust the claim. Yeah. And so, like in a jurisdiction, let's just use those two as a comparison. Ontario, the benefits are, well, again, it depends on the nature, but they could be, in a really minor injury as low as $3,500, standard or middle of the row, $65,000 in medical and rehabilitation, or if the injury is much more significant, the limits on the no fault side for medical expenses can go up to $1 million. Okay, now
that's if you elect the Ontario coverage. Okay, so if I decide to say, well, look, I'm in Florida, I got Florida healthcare, maybe I should elect the Florida coverage. Is that better?
Florida has $10,000 in what they call PIP. So we have seen, sadly, people who didn't know, assumed that their only rights were Florida, elected Florida PIP of $10,000, typically exhausted by an ambulance ride to the ER.
Yeah, you burn through that before you're even at the hospital.
Yeah, and they lost out on at least the $65,000 and possibly $1 million in coverage.
Wow. And that was just because they didn't even know that they could make a decision, and their Ontario coverage that they had with them. But do you have to be driving your own car, or is this if you have a rental car? When does that Ontario insurance? So let me just zero in on this. So the first thing is, if you have an accident, you need to know there's a difference between the Ontario coverage and the Florida coverage. So get advice on that. And that's my concern, is that a local Florida attorney may not know that you have that entitlement. So that's one issue. But then does this apply? Is this only if I'm driving my own vehicle in Florida? Or what if I pick up an Avis or a Hertz at the airport? I'm governed under my credit card insurance. Like who's covering me then?
And that's only the first part of the coverage. There's even more coverage available in Ontario potentially. But to answer your question, the Ontario coverage applies whether you're driving your own vehicle or a rental vehicle, or if you're not driving a vehicle at all.
So what, I'm riding an e-bike?
Riding a bicycle, walking, pedestrian crossing, get hit by a car. In fact, it applies even if your Ontario vehicle is still parked in your garage in Toronto.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. So however I get the injury, I don't even need to be in a car. My Ontario insurance from my car will still provide me a benefit.
Yes, provided it's a car accident. So pedestrian, cyclist, motorist, passenger, taxi passenger, rental vehicle. If you're covered by an Ontario auto insurance policy, with some exceptions, which I can't go into them all, generally speaking, you will have coverage under your Ontario auto policy, because even though the accident happened in another province or another state.
Wow. Okay. So we know from this that if that happens, your first best bet is to look at what you're covered on your Ontario policy versus the local coverage. Is this a standard amount of insurance coverage that's built into every policy, or do I have the ability as the consumer to increase that? Because whatever, like the entitlement may not be enough for my lifestyle because I'm a big shot. Is this standard, or can I go in with my insurance agent and say, look, I'm in Florida a bunch. I want to make sure if something happens, I'm covered. I'd like to buy more. Is that something that's possible?
You can buy more. So Ontario, unlike some, so Ontario has standard auto policies in terms of the language. Okay. So the language for the first party coverage, meaning the no fault coverage, language for the liability coverage in the event that you're at fault for a crash is standardized. So every policy, no matter who you buy it from, will have the same language, but there are options. Okay. In terms, there are minimums that must be in there, but there are certainly options. So people can buy additional coverage. And with respect to the no fault side, the trend in Ontario is reducing what's standard. Okay, so over the years, the standard benefits have been eroded, taken away, and have turned more into optional benefits for the protection for yourself. So my advice to any friend or relative or anybody for that matter in Ontario is make sure you're talking to your broker about all of the optional benefits, because generally speaking, they don't cost a lot more. They're pretty cheap to add on.
Right.
And so it's important to add those optional benefits because you could be giving up a lot of coverage.
No, that's good advice. And it's something that I do personally. Every few years, I'll book an appointment with my insurance agent. And it's amazing how, at least in my experience, they're not as proactive as I'd like them to be. And we have a conversation about, like, where are you traveling? What have you bought? Do you still own that thing? Have you bought anything else? And just make sure that, because unfortunately, people only learn they don't have enough coverage after the fact, which is not when you want to learn this stuff.
That's right.
So reviewing the coverage is absolutely essential. And if you can add more and it makes sense to do it. One of the things I'm also curious about is, because I think this is more of a problem in the US and Canada, is what happens if the person that hit you or you had the accident with doesn't have any insurance in the US or nominal
that's
insurance?
a common scenario.
Is it?
That's a great question.
That's
And
a
it's
frightening
really
scenario
common.
then.
Yeah, it's a frightening scenario. So Canadians are lucky. By and large, we have good coverage.
Okay.
The minimum limits in Ontario are 200,000. Almost no one has the minimum limits. Typically, we see policies of at least $1 million. More often now, we're seeing even as much as $2 million or more.
Because again, my understanding is not that expensive to add that little bit more, so you might as well to have it.
That's right.
Because when you get sued, you get sued for the most amount of your policy anyway, right?
Sometimes depends. It depends. But in the U.S., so like looking at Florida, for instance, or many states, the minimum limits are significantly lower. Okay, so if anyone did a survey of this, you would see that many states have minimum limits of $20,000 in third-party liability. Florida, in fact, has the minimum limits are zero in third-party liability. So you can comply with the law, the insurance laws of Florida, have your vehicle insured, and actually have zero third-party liability.
That's wild.
Coverage. So if you hit somebody or rear end somebody or strike a pedestrian or cyclist, that person will have zero coverage. So
that's wild.
That takes me to the sort of the second part of Ontario coverage that we were kind of alluding to earlier, which is the good news for Ontario residents is that your Ontario auto policy includes coverage for uninsured or underinsured motorists. So whether that's someone inadequately insured or a hit and run driver who's never identified or someone with no insurance whatsoever.
So again, part of that conversation with, and everyone watching this, I encourage you to pick up the phone right now and book a conversation with your insurance agent. So it's how much coverage do I have? What optional additions can I put on? What does that cost? And then this one is really important, the uninsured motorist coverage.
Uninsured motorist coverage is by far the most important insurance you can have on your auto policy, particularly if you're traveling to the US.
Now, travel. Would it be reasonable for most people to say, like, I didn't know my auto insurance policy would help me in this case. I've got travel insurance. So I bought that. I'm hit by the car. My leg is broken or whatever. Is that sufficient to cover me? Or does one pay out ahead of the other one? Like, how do these all kind of sync together if I've got travel insurance as well?
Yeah, I would say if you're traveling to the US, you should have travel health insurance. It's becoming more and more common. Travel health insurance typically responds first. So if you have it, it typically is the one that pays first. It's the one that the hospital looks to. It's the one that sort of is the first response, I would say.
Right.
So very important to have it. Now, in terms of priority, which insurance company ultimately has to pay it? Generally speaking, Ontario policies are protected in terms of priority, meaning that they pay secondary. Okay, so if you have extended health, if you have travel health insurance, the auto policies typically are protected and get to pay second. But there are some exceptions. There are some situations where your travel health insurance then has a right to get reimbursed.
Okay. But I, as a consumer, I'm not going to be overly worried about that. That's where, the lawyers will all get involved of like who's covering the check after the dinner.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
mostly a concern for the insurance companies among themselves. But as a consumer, having the travel health insurance will protect you, because it usually responds very quickly, because it's designed to respond in those situations where you're abroad, you're hurt, you end up in a hospital, there's emergency health care necessary.
Okay. Now, so that's travel insurance. Now, another area, and I have it for myself, and we encourage many people to have their own disability insurance policies. Now, a lot of people through their employer will have disability insurance, which will cover, most of what their income is going to be on an after-tax basis. But one thing we actually get in a conversation with our clients that are higher income is really have a close look at what your company benefits are, because they may top out at there may be a maximum. And if your income is much higher than that, you need to fill the gap with your own policy. Or if you're self-employed, you're a professional, you have to have your own policy. Do they have that same issue of like who's going to pay in what order? Like, or is that because it's a private policy and it's paying for my disability coverage, I can't work, it covers that? Is that kind of separate from how the auto insurance coverages work?
It's separate, but again, the auto insurance, typically your disability policy will pay first in terms of your
Yes.
income
Right.
loss, and then the auto insurance can act as a top up. Okay, so
Okay.
the standard auto insurance coverage for the income replacement benefit, that's what
Yeah.
it's called,
Yeah.
or the income continuation benefit, is $400 a week.
So
it's
okay,
very
that's
low.
really, that's important. We understand that
Very low.
you couldn't buy lunch on $400 a week.
Yeah, and I would say more than 95% of the cases we see, clients that that come to us have the standard $400 a week.
Wow.
And of course, it creates a financial hardship, because if they don't have other benefits like disability, long-term disability, or something else in place, it can ruin your life, and it creates that financial hardship. Oftentimes, forces people back to work early, compromises their recovery. So really important to have something else, because the income replacement benefit is nowhere near enough.
Yeah, and in our financial plan, that's a really important element we look at, and because it is one of those things that people don't want to think about, but it happens, and it creates, it turns something that's very unfortunate into a tragedy. I always find it interesting that like every Christmas Eve, there's always a news story about someone's house on fire and it burned up the Christmas tree and all the presents. And every year there's a story about that. And then the next part is they didn't have any homeowners insurance, so donations can be made at a local bank branch or something, or a GoFundMe or something. And it's like, does no one know that this happens? Like, so, so this is interesting that, because back to the auto insurance, I didn't realize that was an important decision that someone had to make. So I think one of the first calls they should make if they have a situation is to somebody like you, so that they have an advocate to help guide them through this at a point in time where they're probably scrambled with all kinds of other considerations.
Yeah, we get calls from Canadians pretty well that have been in accidents all over the United States, not just Florida or Texas. I'm licensed in Michigan as well, but all over the United States, and we're happy to take those calls. I usually we'll get on the phone. Consultations are free, whether it's a Canadian injured, or sometimes it's a lawyer in the United States. So maybe someone did go see a lawyer, and the lawyer, some lawyers figure it out quickly. Hey, there might be these other benefits. Let me speak to someone with experience. But the point is, if you're a Canadian injured anywhere in the U.S. and you've got questions, reach out to us, because even if I cannot speak to the specifics of the jurisdiction where your crash occurred, I can at least educate you on the Ontario side of the benefits, and more often than not, I can guide you and find the right person in the state where you are, because we've pretty well dealt with Canadians injured in just about every U.S. state.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah.
And then let me give you another scenario that we have this with clients that have second homes in places like Florida and Arizona, where they maintain a car there. They bought a car, they leave it in the garage. It's got Ontario license plates or Arizona license plates or North Carolina license plates. What's their status? So they're an Ontario resident. They've got Ontario insurance, but they're driving their Florida car, which has Florida insurance. What
Yeah.
happens if they have an accident? Is it like, yeah, you can depend on the Ontario stuff, or nope, you don't get that? You're on your U.S. car with your U.S. insurance. You're stuck with that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, you got it. So I can see the convenience and the draw to having a car in the state where you have an extra house and
Yeah.
you fly in and you have the convenience of a car there. But the drawback is it can let your Canadian insurance off of the hook because within the policy language there are provisions that say if you have a vehicle insured in the jurisdiction where the crash occurred, so plated and insured in that jurisdiction, then you no longer have recourse against your Ontario auto insurance. Right. And it kind of makes sense because at that point you basically consented to the risk. You're adopting the laws of that state. You've purchased insurance within that state.
Yeah, and you kind of opted out of the Canadian coverage, right? Because you've
right.
got now. So if somebody has that scenario, I would argue then it's even more important they look at their own personal, disability policies, because they're going to get a very low amount, I would guess, from the American policy compared to what Canada would give, and so they're really going to be dependent on whatever they've acquired on their own, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, so in that situation, I would say, for the most part, depends on where it is, because the no fault coverage is state specific or province specific. Okay, so those are provincial and state legislation that determines whether or not it's a no fault state, like Ontario, like Michigan, like Florida to a certain degree, where there are no fault benefits, meaning first party benefits.
Right.
But there are some states where you have no first party insurance on your auto. You're on your own, and your only recourse is to sue the at fault party. So if someone does have a vehicle plated in the U.S., the things they need to look at are their uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage.
Right.
Okay, so that if somebody does hit them without adequate insurance, at least they have a right of recovery to pay those medical bills or pay other losses.
Yeah, you got someone else's deep pockets.
That's right. Your own insurance. You've covered yourself.
Right.
And then, like you said, disability policies, travel health insurance, things like that.
So so let's move off of cars, and I want to go back to the travel insurance, because this is another news story that we kind of see with some regularity and frequency. Is the person that they bought the travel health insurance from their credit card company or from their CA or whatever. They've acquired it, they go down, and then they discover when they're in the hospital or whatever that they're not covered for something, and they're on the hook for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what happened there? They thought they bought a policy. Why aren't they getting paid out? Again, this is, as I say, a regular news story that seems to pop up. So where's the gap that happened?
So that's going to be really fact specific. So if there's a denial in coverage, because sometimes it's a pre-existing, sometimes they argue, in your application for insurance, you failed to disclose certain things, or you didn't answer a question correctly. Those are things we would look at, but it's typically very case specific. So you have to look at the policy language, the application for insurance, the reason for the denial. Is it a valid denial or not? I would suggest to everyone, if an insurance company ever denies a claim, don't accept that. Get an opinion. Yeah, do not accept the denial of a claim. Don't take their word for it. Have it investigated. Have it looked at by a lawyer to see whether or not there is whether or not there is recourse, because oftentimes there is recourse and there is coverage, despite what the insurance company may be saying.
Right. Because I guess the first answer is no. And then they need somebody like you to help argue it. Now, one of the reason I mention this is that I think it often surprises people because the way in which insurance, and you make sure I understand this correctly, that the way insurance is underwritten, like where the insurance company decides to take the risk, is very different for things like travel insurance than it is for things like life insurance, right? So if I want to buy a life insurance policy and it's of a certain amount, usually life insurance policy is going to ask me to do they're going to ask me medical questionnaire. They're going to ask me about my doctor's report. They're going to ask for a paramedical. They'll want to sample my blood, my urine, other things to see where is my health. They'll also may ask me things like, and I get all the questionnaires because if you ride motorcycles or scuba dive, there's other questions for those. So I get almost all of those because they're trying to assess your risk so that when they sell you the insurance, they put the right price tag on it. So if you live a really risky lifestyle or you have poorer health than average, you're going to pay more. If you are a triathlete and you wear your helmet on your bike and you are in better than average health, you get a lower rate. So the reason I mention that is that the insurance company's figuring out their risk before you buy the policy. But for travel insurance, they don't underwrite the risk when you buy it. They figure out the risk kind of when you have a claim. Is that correct? Like it's kind of opposite?
I would say in both of those scenarios, they can go back.
Okay.
Now, life insurance has specific legislation that governs how long they can contest it, et cetera. Right. But if a person dies, let's say shortly after taking out a life insurance policy, mm-hmm. the insurer will collect all the medical records, go through your application, and for instance, they'll say, well, it says no tobacco on here, and in fact, you're on Champix, trying to stop smoking.
Yeah,
and they can contest it.
Yeah,
right. But after a certain period of time, it becomes uncontestable.
Right. So usually, like 2 years is usually the one because what they're really afraid of is somebody, lying and getting away with it, or they buy the policy and they commit suicide.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. So any of these insurance policies, they can go back and look at what you disclosed or failed to disclose. They can do that in auto policies. Mm-hmm. They can do that in obviously health insurance policies, same thing, to see whether you disclosed and collect your records. And if they say it was material to their decision to issue the policy or set the premiums, then they can say it's a material misrepresentation. And had we known this, we would have either not issued this policy or you would have been charged, X dollars, and therefore we're not covering you now. So, thankfully it doesn't happen. It happens too much, but it, for the most part, in our experience with these health insurance policies, for the most part, they do pay, and they pay quickly.
Okay. Yeah, the stories that I'm referring to are the ones where they seem to fall on you had a pre-existing condition, and so now we won't provide you the coverage. The person thought they were fine, and they may not have even known they had a condition. So what we advocate, because we can offer that to our clients, is that if there's anything in your medical background or history, you've had a surgery or whatever, and you need the coverage, we will probably want to get an underwriting decision before you buy it, so at least And in some cases, the insurance policy can actually have the pre-existing condition is covered, right? Because it may have been something that wasn't that severe. So it's really making sure that there's an absence of surprises, because these are never good surprises.
Yeah, the best advice I would say with insurance is disclose everything. You're better off to find out before that you don't have coverage than later.
Right.
Because now at least you're conducting yourself knowing of the risk, or you'll find other coverage. You might have to pay a little more, but at least you're covered.
Right. And then I would argue, as we close this off, the next thing to do is if you have a problem, get an advocate.
That's important. Yeah. Because another right that insurance companies have on your policy is typically they can question you. They can take statements from you. They can do what's called an examination under oath, which is essentially a deposition where they ask you questions under oath. So if you have a denial, or if they're investigating the insurance coverage, best to get advice from a lawyer early, so you say the right things and you make sure you're protecting yourself and your ability to advance that claim and be successful.
Yeah, you don't want to cause yourself more problems. And again, I would imagine that when these things happen, you're thinking of other things. You're hurt, or a family member's hurt, or the car's wrecked, or there's a lot of stress. So having somebody in your corner helping guide you properly is essential. Okay, well, listen, I want to wrap that up today because that wasn't much. Like at the end of the day, this is really important, but it's not a party. But these are really essential things to think about. So something fun. So you've got an interesting hobby that I think it might be fun to share with people because it also has risks. So you got to manage risk. What is your favorite thing to do besides letting your Tesla drive you around? What is the hobby?
My favorite thing is the horses.
Yeah, you're big. You love riding horses, right?
Yeah.
But as a
Raining
particular
horses,
type, I was going to say, so reining. Yeah. So how would you describe reining to someone who doesn't know anything about it?
It's a question we get often. So usually the way I say it is, have you ever seen dressage? And a lot of people say, no, I've never heard of dressage.
You're not helping me here.
And I say, okay, have you ever watched Yellowstone?
Yeah. And
usually somebody says, I've watched Yellowstone. I say, remember that part where the horses are running down and they hit the brakes and they slide?
Yeah.
And so most people recognize reining from that signature maneuver, which is the sliding stop. But it's a unique sport. It's an incredible sport. The horses are super athletic, lots of drive. They require immense amount of training. So it's a really difficult, challenging sport. And I think that's part of why I love it so much. But also, just the people you meet, the animals, what they can teach you. It's incredible.
Yeah, and that's how.
Try it.
I'm not trying it. No, I'm not. So just so everybody knows, this is actually how you and I met because you're into this sport and my daughter's into this sport. So you love it. I just pay for it because I see the horses and I'm looking for the yellow safety line so they don't touch me, right? So you love it. I'm not getting on one. I'm delighted you like it. I'm delighted she likes it because I think it's a great, healthy thing for particularly young women to be involved with. I think it's great. Yeah. She's very disciplined and. The fact that she won't make her bed, but she'll go shove her horse shit is amazing to me. But it's great because she's learned to look after animals, and I think it's great. And the discipline to ride and the athleticism behind it. Until you see it, you could easily take it for granted, but it is hard. So kudos to you for doing it, and I know it gives you a lot of peace.
I love it. I'll be there tonight.
Oh, wow. Okay. I won't. They don't need a bill from me, so it's all good. Daddy doesn't need to go up there for a little while. But I'll probably see you in a couple of weekends at another show.
Excellent.
That'll be good. But yeah, so you and I both met at the barn about horses, and then we just discovered we're both in the cross-border space in a complementary but different way. So it was great for you and I to spend some time on this and share this with our audience because most of them are going to have a situation statistically where this is a reality they need to attend to. So great advice. Really happy to meet you. These are things that I didn't know we didn't know. So Andrew, thank you. And for anyone out there, if you want to have another conversation, happy to connect you with Andrew. We'll make sure all your information is available. And if you have a problem, make sure you got his phone number in your pocket.
Thank you so much, Darren. Pleasure.
Okay. Thank you. Talk to you again. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
This has been Two-Way Traffic with Darren Coleman. Thanks for watching and listening. If you have any questions or comments or ideas for new episodes, send us an email at twowaypodcast@gmail.com. And you can find the Two-Way Traffic Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. This series is a production of the Acme Podcasting Company.
On behalf of the Two-Way Traffic Podcast and Portage Wealth of Raymond James, thank you for listening to this conversation. This podcast has been prepared by and expressed the opinions of Darren Coleman and his guests and are not necessarily the opinions of Raymond James Ltd. Statistics, data, and other information presented are from sources Raymond James believes to be reliable, but their accuracy cannot be guaranteed. This podcast is for information purposes only and is not construed as an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of securities. Investors considering any investment should consult with their investment advisor to ensure that it is suitable for the investor's circumstances and risk tolerance before making any investment decision. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Information provided in this podcast is general in nature and should not be construed as providing legal, accounting, and/or tax advice. Should viewers have any specific questions or issues in these areas, please consult your legal, tax, and/or accounting advisor. Raymond James Ltd. is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James USA Ltd is a member of FINRA and SIPC. Raymond James Ltd and Raymond James USA Ltd financial advisors may only transact businesses in provinces and/or states where they're registered.